What seemed so awful has turned into this incredible movement of shifting the dynamic of how we see ourselves as women, how we see ourselves as leaders, how we see ourselves as healthcare providers, as mothers, as human beings who love others deeply. Hello and welcome to the 400th episode of the Business of Happiness podcast. Oh my gosh. Hello and welcome to the Business of Happiness podcast. I am your host, Dr. Tarryn MacCarthy, and there are tears. Tears filling up in my eyes, celebrating this, the 400th episode. Guys, I can't even believe 400 episodes. I am celebrating me here in real life in front of you because I do not teach a damn thing that I do not absolutely practice myself. And one of the most powerful things that I have learned about leaders and staying in your power is learning how to celebrate you and yourself and not waiting or needing that from anybody else. And so today you are watching it in full action. Ta-da! The 400th episode of the Business of Happiness. Oh my gosh, 400. It's a really big deal. 400 episodes of holding women in dentistry and seeing and loving and supporting you and pouring my heart into you. I'm so honored and I'm so excited to celebrate this. And I'm so excited to celebrate with you here today, celebrating not just my success and my dedication showing up for you every week, but celebrating the women who listen to the podcast, celebrating you for realizing that there is so much more to life than hustle and force and the old paradigm of success. There's so much more. The richness and the fullness of life is so much more than sacrificing yourself for your bank account or a number on the scale or the expectations of others or Google reviews from your patients. There's so much more. And I'm celebrating you, all the women listening who are breaking generational patterns in their families, in their lineage. Those generational patterns of putting themselves last, of women martyring themselves for others to hold everything together, to push through and deny themselves and serve at the absolute depletion of their own energy. I'm celebrating you for realizing that taking care of you is the most important thing you can do for the people you serve and the people you love. I'm celebrating the power and strength and capacity of women in leadership who show up willing to make a change from a place of heart-centered leadership, heart-centered decision-making, saying yes to their dreams, knowing that their dreams and their desires are a directional compass for their purpose here on earth. I'm celebrating 400 episodes of supporting you to see the power of who you are, to see the worthiness of who you are, to remind you that you are not just enough, that you are miraculous, and that the world is so much better because you are here. You know, it is not lost on me that this 400th episode is going live out into the world in all perpetuity, 2 days shy of the 10-year marking of the passing of my brother. 10 years ago, almost to the day of this podcast, this 400th episode podcast, my baby brother took his life. And it is because of that moment that the Business of Happiness podcast exists. You know, I remember when Douglas passed. I mean, it was devastating. We did not expect it. It was not something that any of us would ever even have imagined or fantasized. I mean, we could never have thought that that would ever happen. And it was devastating. It was a complete shock. And I spent the first year after his passing in so much grief and so much fight or flight and really trying to make meaning of it. And, there were things in that year I didn't know how to handle grief. I drank way too much. I worked way too much. I poured myself into building a brand new scratch start orthodontic practice. I worked 7 days a week. I tried to save everyone in the family. I went over and above to control things in my life. I didn't know how to live in a world that felt so out of my control. And it was because of Douglas that I realized life is too short. It's too short not to follow your dreams. And in the months after his passing, we were contacted by so many people who knew Douglas, who we didn't know. I mean, he was an adult in his 30s. And so many of his friends reached back out to us and told us what he meant to them. Douglas at the time was a bartender, and he was a great listener. He listened to your problems, and then he made you feel really good about it. He was happy all the time. And I think that was the biggest shock for his friends and the people who knew him in his community, because they said to us over and over again, Douglas was the happiest person we knew. Douglas was the person we all went to when we had trouble in our lives. I mean, he would listen, he would guide. He was such a great support in the role that he played as a bartender. I can just see him shining. Douglas made you feel so important when you were around him. He made you feel so special. And I think he helped people see the power within them. And I remember after he passed thinking, I will never be happy again. I remember saying to myself, gosh, I don't know if I could feel happy again. That whole year of depression and grieving, I really felt so far from myself. And being a generally happy person was really my identity before he passed. I mean, that was who I considered myself to be, very much like Douglas. And in that year, I definitely didn't feel like her. I didn't even know who I was anymore. And I kept slipping further and further from the life that I had built for myself. I'll never forget, a year after he passed, it was snowing. It was January here in Maine, and my husband took the kids for sledding. It had just had a big snowfall the day before. We lived right near this golf course. And so he took the 3 kids sledding. And I stayed in the house. It was a Sunday. And I just read depressing books, probably drank. I felt sorry for myself, dreaded going to work the next morning on Monday morning, but knew I'd be there anyway, knew I'd be up at 4, working out because I was pushing myself, training for another triathlon, anything to escape what I was feeling. And I remember pausing in the middle of the day as the sun was going down. It goes down early in January in Maine. And I remember thinking, wow, Tarryn, Douglas died a year ago. And here you have been stepping outside of living, truly living, for the entire year after. Yeah, I was going through the motions. I looked like I was living. I just opened a new orthodontic practice. I had 3 kids. We were busy as all get out. I was doing all kinds of things. I was running triathlons. And I was not living. And it was in that moment I realized, wow, life is too short not to live. And it was in that moment that I decided to follow this inner whisper, really quiet little whisper that had been calling to me, but I hadn't paid attention to start a podcast and to call it The Business of Happiness, and to use this podcast as a platform of rediscovering my happiness, but also to support people to find theirs. And I didn't know what that looked like. I just, in that moment, realized that was a part of my climb back to happiness, back to life, back to finding myself, to honor Douglas's life, and to honor this life that we all live. And in the beginning, the business of happiness was talking to other business owners. And I really focused on business owners outside of dentistry first, to try and get a different perspective from the little box, the narrow-minded perspective that we tend to have in our industry. And I thought, okay, let me talk to wildly successful business owners who are also happy. So they're running these really successful businesses, but they're not completely drained. I was missing the mark completely, that I was doing it to myself, that I was draining myself because I was using work as an escape from feeling the discomfort, feeling the sadness and the grief of my brother's passing. But anyway, this is what I was focusing on. And I thought, okay, let me talk to other business owners and find out, how do they navigate wildly successful businesses, big ambitions, big goals, big dreams, and feel happy, find happiness in the process. And that's really where the podcast started. And as time went by, I realized that the people I knew and loved most were women in dentistry. And as I looked around, I was seeing all these women sacrificing themselves for their patients, for their teams, for their families. These incredibly capable women who were, some of them the most successful women in their families, some of them the most successful women in their communities, and they were upholding not just their teams and their patients, but their whole families, their communities. They were the people that everyone went to when the proverbial shit hit the fan. When grandma was in the hospital, she was the one that everyone called. My clients, my colleagues, women dentists, they were calling her to go and advocate for grandma. When someone needed financial support, they called her. When the kids' piano lesson got canceled, they called her. When the nanny didn't show up, she took care of it. Here were these women who were literally holding everyone else up around them, and they were feeling exhausted and drained and frustrated and resentful, a little bit angry, definitely not happy, not thriving. And I thought, where did we get this wrong? Where did we get this wrong where from this really heart-centered place, we went into this profession wanting to serve, to give people their smiles back? I mean, how beautiful is that, to have a dream of helping people smile, taking people out of pain? How beautiful is it to have a dream of owning a practice and having some work-life balance, to be with your children and an entrepreneur and hold a business that can support whole teams? I was just falling in love with these women who didn't feel loved, not by others and not by themselves. And the voices that were most loud to them were the patients who were complaining. The voices who were most loud were the team members who gave their 2 weeks notice on a whim. Even after the business owner would stand up and take her on a 2-week vacation, or give her an advanced loan, or go out of her way to support her family. And over and over again, I saw these women feeling like they just were not being valued, and starting to wonder, was this worth it? As they watched themselves work harder, longer hours, take on more debt, feel less worthy. And that was when I started coaching. I realized that I needed a lot more education. So I went back to school and I learned more about psychology. I learned more about nervous system regulation. I learned more about subconscious programming. I learned more around the words that we use in our heads and how that affects us in terms of our stress, the thoughts that we think, the beliefs that we believe. And I learned so much around how the world of dentistry impacts us and our fight or flight response, and why women go to such extremes to sacrifice themselves as a pure stress response. And it has been so rewarding to support the women that I've supported over the years. And it started with this podcast. And why this is so important to me today, as I think about Douglas's passing. And by the way, for those of you who have lost someone near to you, I'm sending you so much love. And I know that it's possible, because I've experienced it, to come through grief with even deeper appreciation and love. And honestly, for me, a deeper connection to my brother. My connection with him now is so much richer even than it was in his life. And it was because of this moment 10 years ago when Douglas made this decision and left us so bereft and so depressed and terrified and, just afraid. I mean, we were scared. What just happened? What happens in your world when the last thing you think is possible actually happens? I mean, it blows your mind. What is the point? So many existential questions came up for us, came up for me. So even at this darkest moment, something so beautiful arose. And I think if we can just remember that, because there's no such thing as happy all the time. That's not what we're doing here as humans. There are going to be challenges. There are going to be moments of disappointment or loss or fear, or moments that seem so insurmountable, that seem so outrageously difficult to navigate. And if I could go back and hold myself 10 years ago and just let her cry, let her feel all the feelings, it's so important to do that. Let her know that it's okay to feel all the things, that she doesn't have to work through it, that she doesn't have to show up for her patients tomorrow, that she deserves to take time away and love herself and work through this. If I could go back in time and tell her that she doesn't have to prove herself or make sense of what happened, but give her time to grieve. And then also plant for her a little seed of hope, just a small one. Let her know that something beautiful is always possible on the other side, even when it seems like the worst thing ever. Because here I sit 10 years later, 400 episodes later, and I see now this incredible legacy. I don't know if Douglas ever could have known that this is what he would spur out of his choice. Of course he couldn't have known, but I wish I could show him now. I mean, I know he sees it. I know he's aware. The number of lives that he has impacted in such a beautiful way. The number of families, the number of practices and their employees and patients. I mean, the ripple effect of this beautiful moment, what seemed so awful, has turned into this incredible movement of shifting the dynamic of how we see ourselves as women, how we see ourselves as leaders, how we see ourselves as healthcare providers, as mothers, as human beings who love others deeply, and learning to love ourselves. And that really is the crux of it. If I look back and I think about Douglas, I wish that he had found something like the business of happiness in the years before he passed, to remind him of his worthiness, to remind him of his power, to remind him of the impact he was having on the world. He had no idea. He didn't realize in the months after his passing how many people would come forward and say, wow, he made such a big difference on my life. And when he was alive in that moment, he didn't realize how valuable he was. And that is my biggest wish to you on this 400th episode. My biggest wish to you and for you is for you to see the value you have on this earth. And so I want to celebrate you. I want to thank you, but I really want to celebrate you. You're doing amazing things every single day. And where that really matters is when you start realizing it and acknowledging it. Because a woman who recognizes her worth uplifts everyone around her. A woman who recognizes her deservancy, her value, the fact that she is worthy to say, I need a break today. The fact that she is worthy to say, ask for what she needs. That is a powerful woman who is able to hold space for others, who doesn't need permission from her patients or her team or her children or her spouse to ask for what she needs. She understands her value and she passes that paradigm on to the people around her. She evidences it for others. She models it for her children. She becomes that woman who breaks the generational pattern of martyrdom, of overworking, the old paradigm of slaving ourselves for an economic system, for a bank account, for paying off loans, but recognizing, oh, wait a minute, of greater value than all of that noise, all those automatic negative thoughts and fears in my head, even greater than that, is the power of loving me. Because we need you, each and every single one of you. We need you. The world needs you. And I want you to hear this from the depths of my heart. We need you. We need women like you who recognize that we are all worthy and who sees that because she starts valuing herself first. And so today, in honor of the 400th episode of The Business of Happiness, I want to remind you what I say at the end of every episode. When you feel good, you can do good. And so here on this day, I get to ask you, what would feel good today? Feeling good for me today is celebrating myself, is celebrating the gift of this podcast. Really, for me, just making a big deal of it is making, my cheeks are hurting. I've been smiling this whole podcast episode, and celebrating that gift of being able to have this platform to share this with you, to share this message that has just been bubbling for me, maybe my whole life, but really in the past 400 episodes. And I just want to say thank you for listening. And thank you for showing up for you, because you matter. So celebrate with me here today and let me know. Send me a message, send me an email. Tell me how you're celebrating you today. One of the most powerful things you can do. And then watch the ripple effect on the world around you. Because just imagine for one moment how different our world would look if everyone knew how to love themselves. Thank you for listening to the Business of Happiness podcast. If this episode brought you new perspective and value, I invite you to subscribe so that you catch all upcoming episodes and leave us a review. And if you know of a friend or colleague who could benefit from this perspective, share this episode with them and empower their day. For more information about the Business of Happiness and the Radical Happiness for Practitioners course, find me on www.thebizofhappiness.com. See you there.